Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait a couple of more minutes. I know it's 9:07, but just want to wait in case we have a couple of stragglers. Okay, I think we should start. Give me one sec, everybody. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Really happy to be doing this today about this webinar about the Long Island Zoning Atlas. So thank you for joining us. And the Long Island Zoning Atlas is an innovative tool that maps our entire region to help us determine what can be built where. Sorry about that. It's the governor's office, so it's not like I'm being rude. See what can be built where. The Long Island Association thought it was important to support this creation of this web platform to make it easier for developers and municipalities to collaborate on creating desperately needed new housing options. Census data that came out last week confirms what we all know to be true. Our region's getting crushed by the cost of living here. We know it's an existential crisis for Long Island. And while the entire country is dealing with an affordability crisis, it's certainly more acute here on Long Island, and housing costs in particular are a concern. The census data found that more than 43% of Long Islanders with a mortgage devote more than 30% of their income to housing costs. And when you look at renters, the number is more than 53% who have a housing cost burden of more than 30%. And so both of these statistics exceed the US and statewide average. So we know this is unsustainable. That's why having the tools and the knowledge to break this trend is so critical. I want to thank the Community Development Corporation of Long Island and Gwen O'Shea, you see her in one of the boxes, for spearheading the Long Island Zoning Atlas, and the CUNY Graduate Center's Stephen Romalewski for the incredible, I hope I got that right, Stephen, for the incredible work and time they've devoted to the Long Island Zoning Atlas. We want this session to be interactive, so at the end, if you have a question, please add to the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. Thanks again for joining us today. We have a lot of events coming up this fall, so please check out the LIA events calendar. We'll put it in the chat. You can also find it on our website, longislandassociation.org. And so with that, I'd like to now introduce the president and CEO of the Community Development Corporation of Long Island. I've known her a long time. She's awesome. She's doing an incredible job. Really blessed to have her and really happy to support what she's doing because it's so important, and really appreciate everything that Gwen O'Shea does. So with that, Gwen O'Shea.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was a very, very kind thank you introduction. And I want to just acknowledge and thank you and the LIA for your support of the Zoning Atlas, because it really was critical to get this effort off the ground. And as you all will see from the conversation and the walkthrough that Steve does, this was quite an undertaking and will continue to be in terms of maintaining it, but also has tremendous impact. As Matt noted, with the housing crisis that we are dealing with on the island, the Zoning Atlas is really a critical tool to moving forward lots of the development that we know is critical and desired to ensure Long Island's sustainability and ability to thrive. So I'm thrilled to be with you this morning, joined by my colleague Steve, who I will turn the mic over to in just a minute, but did want to give you all a little bit of background on how the Zoning Atlas came together. It does require us to take a little bit of a step back in time here during the COVID pandemic. We, as an organization, CDLI, was undertaking an internship project where we thought we have nothing but time right now. And so perhaps what we could take a look at is starting to pull together some of the zoning data that municipalities hold on Long Island to try and paint a picture of development opportunities and what the landscape looks like from a zoning perspective. And simultaneously, as our intern program was working on this, many of you know the exemplary leaders, Sol Marie Alfonso Jones at the New York Community Trust and Ann Golub from the Roush Foundation. They were looking at addressing the issue of furthering housing on Long Island and looking really, quite frankly, across the country at different models, whether it be legislation, policies, or tools that could be beneficial for us as a region and for the state as we look to expedite development opportunities. And so as Sol and Ann were undertaking this coalition building and this deep dive into research, they came upon the zoning atlas, the national zoning atlas. And in short, the intention of a zoning atlas is really pulling together zoning laws and codes for a region, because as Matt noted, they dictate everything that gets built or doesn't get built, right? And that has tremendous impact on us as from an economic perspective, an environmental perspective, and a social and health perspective. So this tool, the goal in pulling all that information together is really to standardize, centralize, and make accessible information about zoning so we can really look at an apples to apples comparison to strengthen planning and expedite, housing development, ideally transportation, and of course, for a region like ours, infrastructure and climate response from a long-term perspective. So it was in 2021 that the first zoning atlas was started in Connecticut as a statewide tool, and that was led by Sarah Brannan of the Cornell University, who joined our group to share a little bit of background on that. And as we were listening to the potential of creating a tool such as the zoning atlas, it was clear we had started some of the foundation work with the work undertaken by our interns. And so it was with CDLI, Roush, the Community Trust, and RPA that we finalized the first phase of that data collection. And as we were thinking about how do you take that information and transfer it into a user-friendly, centralized, easy, but authentic in terms of the actual objective factual information, how do we create that? And for those of you that are familiar with the Long Island Index and the amazing mapping tools that were provided there, that was created obviously with Ann and the Roush Foundation, but through Steve and his team's leadership. And so it was at that point that we reached out to Steve to see if this would be something that he would be interested in working with us on. And thankfully, he said yes. And so as we moved into the next phase, what we saw for Long Island, as I mentioned, Connecticut did a statewide zoning atlas. This is the Long Island zoning atlas that actually has more zoning districts than the state of Connecticut as a whole. Not surprising to all of you that do work in the development space or the advocacy or the planning space. We have many, many layers of government here. So it was a tremendous undertaking. And the hope is really, again, to make sure for every area, whether it's those in planning, engineering, advocacy, community engagement, that individuals have access to this information, free access to this information, that it's standardized and centralized and available and maintained on an ongoing basis. And so as we have started to launch the tool, which was officially launched in December, we are grateful to the support we've received, Steve, thank you, to get it up and running, but then also to maintain it. Right. And so it's critical. And we have seen, which Steve will talk a little bit about, we have seen some changes in less than a year, which is very exciting related to some zoning code within municipalities. We've seen tremendous interest in new users accessing the tool on a daily basis. But to get the project off the ground, it was really with the support of these sort of 4 anchor entities and the support from individuals and entities like the LIA, Bank United, Association for Better Long Island, the Long Island Builders Institute, the IDA, Nassau County, Roush, and Suffolk County Economic Development. And thankfully, post-launch, which was in December of 2024, we do have commitment from a variety of entities, including the LIA, which we are so grateful for, Bank United, New York Community Trust, Suffolk County Economic Development, Suffolk County IDA, Brookhaven IDA, and the Roush Foundation. And so there's a lot of great momentum. There's a lot of great new aspects that have been added to the tool since we first started, which Steve will work through. And there's a lot on the horizon which we're also extremely excited about, as we'll be able to see with the assistance of Suffolk County in real time where there are development opportunities and sewer and water infrastructure to allow those opportunities to cross the finish line. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to Steve to do a walkthrough and just reiterate Matt's opening comments. This is meant to be an interactive conversation. Steve will walk you through some of the functionalities, which I think are extremely impressive. And then we can have a conversation about certain parcels, information, additional overlays, or other intel that could be useful to you in terms of your work as we think about, again, moving forward housing development here on the island. So I'll pause there and turn it over to Steve to walk us through the build out and take a walk through the site.
Thank you so much, Gwen, and thank you to LIA for hosting the webinar, and of course for your support. Just a couple of words of background about what went into creating the Atlas, and then I'll go through some slides that highlight what you can do with the Atlas, how you can use it, and if we have time during the Q&A, I'm happy to share my screen to actually show an interactive demo if that makes sense. So anyway, as Gwen pointed out, there was a huge amount of work to collect and standardize information from each zoning ordinance, or the zoning ordinance from each municipality, and there's more than 100 of them across Long Island. So that was a major first step to collect all that information, use the template that was created with the Connecticut Zoning Atlas and now is being used nationwide to make sure that when we look from one municipality to another, that we're comparing apples to apples. And then our initial role was to pull together all of the zoning boundaries to incorporate into the map and to combine that with the zoning ordinance information. And that was also pretty challenging because a lot of towns and a couple of villages are far-sighted enough that they have used and incorporated and integrated geographic information systems or computer mapping software and data management. But some towns, or one town anyway, Hempstead, does not use GIS to manage their zoning districts, and almost all of the villages don't. So we had to take all of those PDF and some printed maps and convert that electronically or digitally to create the zoning atlas map. So then we developed in close coordination with CDLI and the team of Long Island groups, and incorporating feedback from a number of organizations across Long Island, the Atlas itself. So this is the initial screen that you see when you visit the Zoning Atlas at longislandzoningatlas.org. And it makes it hopefully easy to access. You can either go right to the map or just right from the main screen, type in a street address or a village or a town or a landmark either. And a couple of things to point out about the kind of one of the main benefits of the zoning atlas is that it gives everyone a bird's eye view, an island-wide view of what the zoning patterns are as it relates to housing development. And that's never been done before, and now it's accessible online, freely accessible for anyone to use. And we'll talk more about the importance of that as we go through the slides. If you've seen some town zoning maps or local zoning maps, you'll see that this looks a little bit different. The purpose of the zoning atlas is to make it easy to see and understand and analyze how zoning impacts housing development, whether it makes it easy or hard to facilitate a diversity of housing options. And so that's why the color shading on this map is focused on that. So yellow indicates zoning that is primarily residential. The pink or red areas indicate zoning that's mixed residential, commercial, or other uses, and blue is areas that are non-residential. And then in various shades of green, we show areas that have various environmental protections, whether they're a local or a state park, or the Pine Barrens, or a Suffolk County farmland, or historic site, where the zoning might allow residential, for example, but it's unlikely, if not impossible, to actually build any housing because of those environmental requirements. So again, it gives you a bird's eye view of what's happening across Long Island. And then if you look at the upper left corner of the map, we give you the opportunity to filter filter what you see on the map based on whether the residential zoning allows single family housing or 2-family or 3 and 4 plus family housing. And so you can see when you filter it for zoning that allows single family housing, it's pretty much everywhere on Long Island. But if you filter that further and look at 2-family housing or 3 and 4 plus family housing, you see that the universe dwindles dramatically very quickly. And this gives you a sense of some of the challenges that are face the region in terms of building enough of a diversity of housing to meet the needs of the region. But then you can go beyond this island-wide view and zoom in very locally, very close. And if you type in a street address, the map will zoom to that address. It'll highlight the zoning district that encompasses that address. Sometimes those districts are kind of spread out throughout a village or a town. So you could see those highlighted in red, or you could just click on the map and it'll do the same thing. And then you can see detailed information about each zoning district. So in the right side panel, it gives the name that the town or village gives to the zoning district, and then other basic information about whether it allows 1, 2, 3, or 4 plus family housing. And as you can see in this case, this particular district allows 3 and 4 plus family housing as of right, and then you can click on those options in the panel on the right and see more detailed information. So this summary on the right is based on what was collected by CDLI and RPA and fact-checked several times to compile all of the zoning ordinance criteria in a standardized format to enable us to show it quickly and easily and consistently, so you can see this exact type of information for every single zoning district across, across Long Island. But we don't want you to just take it from us. We provide a link to each municipality's zoning ordinance, so you can get the latest and official zoning requirements for each and every district and access that directly via the zoning atlas. You can see other, do more analytical mapping as well. So you can, there's a slider at the bottom of the map. If you move it to the left, that makes the zoning layer, as it were, more transparent. And then you can show other mapped information, such as existing land use patterns. So the zoning controls or governs what can be built going forward. The land use data from each of the county's GIS departments show what on a summary level, what is already on the ground, what's already been built. And then we also incorporate the downtown areas from the Long Island Index project that was we mapped about 10 years ago, that show a half-mile buffer around each train station or downtown area if you're interested in transit-oriented development. We also show the Long Island Railroad routes and stations and bus routes across Long Island. Recently, last week, we added some new information. So we incorporated overlay districts, which are very important in terms of modifying or in some cases facilitating beyond what the base zoning requirements are for diversity of housing options. And then we also added the FEMA flood maps so you can see where the flood zones are. And this is the latest data from FEMA. As if and when that gets updated, we'll incorporate those updates as well. Just to give an example of something that's been in the news recently, the transit-oriented development zoning in the town of Hempstead and North Lawrence and Inwood. So in this case, just as a way of illustrating the types of things you can do with the zoning atlas. So in this case, I've clicked on a parcel or a zoning district just south of the train station in Lawrence that is zoned for 3 or 4 family housing. And you can see from the crosshatching that's on that property based on the land use that there's already multifamily housing there. And you can, so this gives you a sense of, again, what the zoning allows, what's already been built, and therefore a better sense of what the possibilities are, both in terms of whether the zoning for the area makes sense and also if the development opportunities in the area make sense. This shows an overlay that I added just for the purpose of the PowerPoint. You can't do this on the zoning atlas itself, but I've added a graphic that shows, just to highlight, the transit-oriented development district just north of the Lawrence and Inwood train stations. And so you can see also what the aerial imagery shows. So what's actually going on the ground, not just what the land use categories show you, and get a sense of what the development possibilities are in this transit-oriented development district, or again, in any district across Long Island. So it gives you all of this information for each and every location, each village, each town, each community. In terms of then, once you have pulled together all of that information from the atlas and supplemented what you already know about the area, we also show, if you want to then take some policy or advocacy steps regarding that area, we show you who represents each district or each location. So the panel on the right of the map shows, for that specific location that you've selected, what legislative districts cover that area, down to, if the town has one, a town council, as well as all of the service special assessment taxation districts, such as fire, sewage, sanitation, water, library, police. So if you're thinking about what the development options are, that could be very helpful information to know which of those districts this location is in. And then on the left side, you could also show these district boundaries island-wide, so you could see what the patterns are across Long Island. And so just before I stop and talk a little bit about what we've accomplished so far and what our plans are for the next year or two, it's important to emphasize that pulling together all of this information and making it hopefully easily accessible and widely accessible, the purpose is to enable anyone, regardless of what your perspective is on development or zoning or housing, to have this information at your fingertips and to be able to incorporate this information into the conversations and discussions about local zoning, local or regional zoning policies, statewide policies that might impact local zoning and local development on Long Island, and to incorporate that information in an informed way in the conversation. So it hopefully takes the conversation beyond anecdotes and oppositional discussions back and forth, and provides a foundation of information that everyone has access to and can begin with in terms of those discussions. So our short-term time frame is that, as Gwen noted, we've collected all this information. We launched the Atlas in December of 2023, and now we're thinking ahead for this year and next in terms of incorporating feedback, enhancing and updating the Atlas, and providing outreach and trainings such as webinars like this. And if you are interested in hosting us to talk to your local organization or other constituencies, we're happy to entertain that as well. Just a little bit more detail about where we are now. So in terms of data updates, it's critically important that the information in the Atlas is kept up to date. And so we've just finished updating and checking all of the zoning ordinances and all of the zoning boundaries to incorporate all of those updates, and that was just added. As you can tell, hopefully it's a big effort to try to collect all this information and compile it in a meaningful way. So there still might be some idiosyncrasies. If you see them, please let us know. We've already gotten a couple of feedback emails over the past couple of months, people pointing out that one of the boundaries wasn't quite right. We fixed them right away. So please keep us posted on that. We've incorporated the updates in terms of overlay districts and flood zones. And now we're working on a couple of other updates, such as incorporating census or demographic information to some extent, hopefully working with some banks who are also, of course, very interested in community development and supporting those efforts, so they have demographic information as well as all the zoning data at their fingertips, and some enhanced search options. But again, if you have ideas or suggestions for how we can enhance the project and make it even more useful, we're very interested in hearing that from you. Here is our contact information. I'm sure you'll get the slides, and I'll stop the share and excuse me, turn it back over to Gwen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. And now, as we mentioned at the beginning, we'd love to hear questions or thoughts on the tool, perhaps an area in particular you'd like us to drill down into from a real-time perspective to sort of check out certain areas, whether it be a parcel or a community specifically. But opening it up for questions, please, if anyone has.
Hey, Gwen, it's Bob Coughlin. I think it's a fantastic resource. I think it's really helpful. It takes us a lot of time to source that information and look for projects. And it also helps out with the community in their research of the projects as well. So thank you guys very much for putting this together.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. We appreciate that. And as we were mentioning earlier, we are, as many of you know, the Suffolk County Executive has a focus on affordable housing and has pulled together an affordable housing task force to look at new ways and opportunities and places and spaces to further development, whether that be home ownership or multifamily development opportunities. And so we're really excited about, as I mentioned, collecting the data in partnership with Suffolk County from Health and Water to look at where there are either where there is sewer capacity within municipalities, and then where there is capacity in standalone septic treatment plants where there's capacity there, and ideally doing an overlay on the map. So again, for individuals, regardless of the size or scope of a development or opportunity you might be looking at, would be able to quickly see in real time what's available, recognizing that is certainly one of the hurdles, recognizing there are many, but one of the hurdles to getting a development completed here on Long Island.
Just an FYI, I put the link to the zoning atlas in the chat if anyone wants to access it.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Any other questions, comments? All right, well,
No.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Bob. Were you
No, I
gonna
was just going to say it's a lot of information to absorb. It's really, really comprehensive and very good. I mean, it does take a lot of time for individual entities to try and research that and find out all that information. And a lot of times you can't even find all of it out. So that's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Glad to hear it. And we know it's also been helpful for municipalities, as Steve was mentioning, that we're looking at becoming part of the pro homes community opportunity that is available through the governor's office, and that all the information necessary for that application is right here in the tool. Again, another way to help streamline and expedite opportunities that municipalities are looking to deliver on.
One question I have is, are the searches that are done by individual entities, are they compiled by anybody, and are they available to others? In other words, how secure is the information if you're looking stuff up?
We don't track any of that. That's completely anonymous.
Okay, thank you.
We have statistics on the number of users, again, anonymously, that have accessed the site, and what organizations have linked to the zoning atlas, such as Newsday and Long Island Business Institute, I think LIA also. But as far as individuals searching, no, we don't track any of that information. Search to your heart's content.
Great, thank you.
I just want to jump in and acknowledge really tremendous work. Thank you to the LIA, Stacy, thank you, Gwen, and Matt, and everybody. I do a lot of work on land use issues. I'm on the Nassau County Planning Commission, actually almost like 20 years now. Yeah, it would be. I'll bet you I'll probably be pulling out my phone and using this app while I'm at the meetings. Because I mean, I sometimes just pull out, uh, ways or whatever because I want to kind of see the area that we're talking about in my own control, being able to move things around. And now to be able to actually check the zoning for the area. Steve in his presentation kind of anticipated some of my questions. So it's sort of like, okay, sure, you got the basic zoning boundary. What about flood map? I mean, we get a lot of that now because a lot of the new development has to be FEMA compliant. So that's very important to know where the boundaries are. So it's just really fascinating to see. I have to admit that was a lot of information really fast. I'm not the best technical person, so I'm going to sit down with my team, but it looks like the kind of things that even guys like me that aren't the most technically adept could find easy to bounce around on. So Steve, I think you put a lot of effort into trying to make it easy to use. So kudos to everybody involved. I'm just trying to process it all. You kind of always sort of accept it on Long Island when you work on land use and zoning issues that this never really existed anywhere, right? Like, it's like, it's sort of like a given, you kind of know the particular town maybe that you work in, you kind of know some of the nuances, but being able to see it all the way, like no one ever really gets to do that. Yeah, this is kind of a game changer. So good stuff.
Well, it was a very interesting process, as Steve mentioned, with some of this data being paper file only. It was a little bit of a wild goose chase for team members collecting the information because certain municipalities weren't forthcoming with the paper
I can
files.
imagine. I'm pretty impressed that you managed
As
to
you
get
can
it all.
imagine. But your comment, Neil, thanks for that. About usability. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit too about the work that the Pratt students did, which I think is so great in terms of helping to further the usability of the tool?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Neil. Really appreciate your comments. And we hope, yes, that it is easy to use. And actually, maybe I can share my screen to just show you, hopefully, how the Atlas actually works beyond, the PowerPoint slide. So this initial screen is, as Gwen mentioned, we got some pro bono support from Pratt Institute's user interface program, their graduate program, and gave us some suggestions on how to enhance the usability of this. And so hopefully we took their suggestions to heart and made it a little bit easier. And I actually use this all the time when I'm testing different aspects of the Atlas because I don't want to have to go to the map to have to search. I just want to type in, a street address or start typing in a village name or a town name, and then you hit return and it zooms to that area and centers that location on the map, and then shows all of the zoning characteristics again. You can see the legend at the bottom of the map, primarily residential, mixed residential, or non-residential, and then this map layers section over here that shows what the different areas in green represent. And you could add other things. So if you're interested in wetlands, you can show where the wetlands are. And if you want to see where the train lines and bus routes are, you could add those via this map layers section over here. And so as I move my mouse over the map, it briefly highlights the zoning district that I'm moving it over. I'll click on the neighboring village, Rockville Center, in this residence A zone. So I click on the map and it highlights it on the map and then populates this panel on the right. If I click the zoom option here, it zooms in a little bit to the extent of the district. Sometimes the extent is little pieces of a zoning district scattered all over a town. So it'll zoom out and show you all of those areas. And then if I click this option here where it shows that in this district, single family housing is allowed as of right, it gives me this basic information, again, that was extracted from each and every zoning ordinance across Long Island. And that we actually, the interns and staff at CDLI and RPA and others who helped us fact check the information. There's more data that we have, but this seemed like the main information that would be helpful to most people, but we may add other data. And then here at the bottom, you can show this overlapping districts option to show for the particular spot I clicked what congressional district represents it, what state assembly district represents it, what town council district. And if I want to zoom to the extent of the council district to see, oops, it zoomed in a little too close. It'll, show you the area so you can see where that is in relation, where that location is in relation to the rest of the district. And then you could see these other service districts and whether which one of those the location is in. And then here are the flood zones. We show the flood zones, and also hopefully this is helpful, the panels that each flood zone is in. So a lot of times you need to search by these firm or flood insurance map panel numbers. So we provide those on the map. And then also, I'll just turn these off, and then I'll turn the overlay districts on. And so if I zoom back in on Baldwin, and I add the overlay district labels, sometimes the labels are a little cluttered, but you can see, the extent of how the overlays relate to the zoning areas. So I'll click in one of these districts. And so the right side panel will show not only the housing opportunities, but also the specific information for the overlay that I've clicked in. And if you want to see what the zoning criteria is in detail for that zoning, for that overlay district, we give you a link here. And if I click that link, hopefully you see the page show the Ecode 360 online version of the zoning ordinance for Baldwin that shows, or for the town of Hempstead, that shows this particular overlay that I'm looking at.
Steve,
So,
how many how many overlay districts were added? Was it 100 and?
I forget the exact number, but it was around 100. And then if I wanted to see again what the land use patterns were, so right now the zoning layer, as it were, is covering what's underneath. So I'm going to make the zoning layer, I'm not going to turn it off, but I'm just going to make it more transparent. And so that reveals the streets, the street patterns, and then I'm going to add the parcel information. And also these downtown areas. So you know what? I'm just going to turn off.
And I think that's a really important piece too, just to highlight for individuals, right, Steve, that purple circle that you're showing, is that a 1/4 mile radius within each Long Island Railroad stop?
Half mile.
Half mile, thank you.
That is helpful, yeah.
And you could see, so I'm going to zoom in again to the, not a little too far, to the area just below the Baldwin train station. I grew up in Baldwin, so I know the area pretty well. And I'm going to turn the zoning layer back on. And so right now the zoning, I'll zoom out a little bit. The zoning is filtered, or it's not filtered. It's showing all of the zoning district types, but I'll click on the filters up here on the left. And so now I'm showing zoning that allows single family housing. That's pretty much everywhere. But in this case, if we're interested to see if this particular zoning in the area just below the train station at Grand Avenue and Sunrise Highway allows different types of housing. So now I've shown what allows 2-family housing, and this mixed residential zoning district that also happens to be within an overlay right near the train station does allow 2-family housing, but it does not allow 3- and 4-family housing. So, and you could also see that from the information on the right side here. So there's some areas like this zoning district over here that I've just clicked in, the CA zone in Hempstead, and you can see the cross-hatching underneath it. I'll make this a little more transparent. So there is already multifamily housing on this property, and the zoning allows 3- and 4-family housing. But just on the east side of Grand Avenue, this cross-hatching here the zoning is not shown. It does not allow three-family housing, but there are actually apartment buildings right along here. So it's sometimes it gives you this interesting disconnect between what the zoning allows, but what's already been built there, which may be different. And again, however you choose to use that information is up to you, but now the information is here at your fingertips, and hopefully, as Neil says, easy to access and easy to use.
Thank you, Steve. I think that was a great example of all the different aspects and components available.
Oh, and I should mention, if I may, that so let's say you're working with a team of people and excuse me, you want to send them this actual map, not just the main link to the zoning atlas. So if you click the share option here, it's kind of a long link, but if you copy this, and I'll put it in the chat, and you can then share this on social media with your colleagues, with anyone else, with the elected representatives, with local town or state planning coordinators, and you can then have a conversation about this exact location. And so if you click on that link, you should see this exact map on your screens when the when the page opens up. And then we also provide some information about, so Neil, if you're stuck, click on the FAQ or the how-to section, and we give some examples with graphics of how to select key aspects of the features and what the search options are that you can then use to make sure you're doing the right thing on the map and accessing the right information. And again, if you have questions, feel free to contact us. We have our contact information right here, and let us know. And if you have feedback, please let us know.
Well, with there not being any additional questions, we want to thank you all for your time and just underscore what Steve had shared. Please, any additional questions, recognize it is a lot of information to take in a 20-minute, presentation, but I'm happy and available to answer any questions. Steve and I are still, like today, doing presentations to different groups, individuals, coalitions, entities that want to sort of do a deeper dive or learn a little bit more about the zoning atlas, and happy to provide that intel to any of you if that could be helpful. We are committed, all the entities that founded and still support this entity, in ensuring the integrity and the quality of information is maintained. And so this tool will be available and continuously updated by the team. Welcome support to allow for that to continue to happen. Also from any and all that might be interested. And just want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank the LIA for hosting this event and supporting the Long Island Zoning Atlas.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, everyone.